And happy Thursday, Xavier Musketeer basketball fans. This is your weekly Razorcast. That's Reaker and Zink talking Muskie basketball. Zink on this end, Reaker on the other. Jim, we finally made it to March, and a big March it is.
Yes, it is. Big Ten. That's the future.
Big Ten? Come on now.
Big East champions, 24.
He just told me to wake up. Yeah.
15-3 in the Big East, number 3 in the AP poll, number 2 in the Coaches USA Day poll, RPI of 3, and regular season champs. And we move on into March. Yeah, what a crazy time it is, and it's already started.
Yeah, it is crazy. It's crazy, and it starts today for the Muskies in about 2 hours. Some of you, by the time you listen to this, will already know the result of their first tournament game because it's at noon. But we get ahead of ourselves a little bit because they did win that Big East title outright, but they didn't take it easy on themselves, did they? They didn't make it easy going up to Chicago, and I know you and your lovely wife went up there to see the game. But the Blue Demons made them work for it, and it was a little scary that they might have dropped into a tie there.
Yeah, and that would have been, a bad taste in the mouth. You know, they had the celebration last Wednesday night after the defeat of the Providence Friars at home, so they could celebrate with the students and the fans at home because they knew they had at least a share of the Big East title. And, of course, they would have taken that and put the banner up, but it does feel a little bit better. And, yeah, it was an interesting game, kind of like a lot of Xavier games this year, kind of the story that you never really felt most of the game that the Xavier Musketeers were not in control. And it came down to the end, and they made a couple key stops right at the end and a key bucket on a design play to get the 3-point lead. And actually, Najee Marshall made a great block on a driving layup that would have brought the Blue Demons within a point, and so they did it. They came out in the end winning, and that's kind of been the story of this team. As they dig down and play defense when they need to, and make some good decisions at the end and win. So yeah, it was great to be there. What a nice place the Wintrust Center just opened this year downtown or out at McCormick Place. Any fans that get a chance to go up there in the future, I think I will return. It's just a beautiful, different type of building.
Mm-hmm. Well, a beautiful place. Paul, another one of the ones that doesn't play its games on campus. But you got to wonder just a little bit. Yeah, you mentioned the defense and the stops they got, but it seems that the offense was just blah. They had 52 points halfway through the second half and only ended up with 65. In fact, they went on a pretty dry run there in the last few minutes. They were stuck on 63 for almost 4 minutes at the end of the game. So they just couldn't put it in the bucket, and they kept letting DePaul back into it. So was this just the DePaul defense doing a great job, or, like you say, a little bit of a victory hangover knowing that they had the Big East tie wrapped up?
Well, one key stat that will jump out at you, and we've talked about this all through the year, they had 20 turnovers and played very sloppily. The other factor, of course, as you point out, and it's going to come into play again today, is that noon tip time. Actually, it was only 11 a.m. up in Chicago. So they did not play great execution. There were a lot of bad passes. Actually, I give a little bit of credit to DePaul because there was one facet of the game that Xavier has used all year to kind of exploit teams like DePaul that really don't have a lot of big men underneath, and that's Karam Cantor, because every time they would go to double him and then he would try to pass out of it, somebody would jump that passing lane. And I think Karam had maybe 3 or 4 turnovers way through it, and obviously it had been practiced by the DePaul Blue Demons. They were jumping that lane that he was passing out of out to a shooter outside. So it was just a sloppy game, and we'll talk about the game today. That's the thing. I think that's the key in my mind, that they cannot play that sloppy, and St. John's, I think, will try to get him into that mode, get him in an up-and-down game where they start running a little bit with him. And I think we'll talk about a little bit later, I'm sure, but the key is going to be to not get into that up-and-down kind of backyard game.
Well, I might as well go ahead and talk about it now. I mean, that was it. It was really just the one game this past week. Other news this week, which is nice, Chris Mack named the Big East Coach of the Year just yesterday, along with Jalen Brunson of Villanova being named Player of the Year, and Omari Spellman of Villanova being named Freshman of the Year. You said on our Trogcast the other day you thought Trayvon Blewett deserved it. I'm sure there were a lot of people in his corner, but you also thought that Jalen Brunson would be the one that got named. But big accolade for Coach Mack to win his first Big East Coach of the Year title.
Yeah, and of course he, as always, was very humble about it. In fact, his comment was, it's really, it's more of an award for the team, that they are the team of the year. Just a couple parting thoughts on the DePaul game going forward. The thing that's been a key for the Musketeers this year and was kind of a problem last year until the end when they got in the tournament was their free throw percentage, and that was really what carried them Saturday. They were 17 for 19 from the charity stripe, 89.5%, and I think they're hovering right around the 80% for the year. And a couple, I forgot last week, I really felt bad that, and this is key going forward, is Quentin Gooden played an unbelievable game against Providence. And the progress of Quentin Gooden as a point guard and now being a scorer when he has the opportunity, either driving to the bucket or now he's been knocking down a lot of threes, I think you have to give him kudos, and the way he runs this team is very, very key. And then at DePaul, another performance that just somebody that keeps getting better, it seems like every game, is going to be a key in the NCAA tournament going forward for the future of the Musketeers is Paul Scruggs. He had 11 points and played a key role a lot of times when Quentin was either out of the game or played the point, giving Quentin the chance to play out on that wing where they like to use him going down the baseline sometimes, backdoor. So just wanted to make those points before we moved on. But, yeah, congratulations to Chris Mack. What a, second one. He had one about 5 years ago in the A10, a Coach of the Year. But very, very deserving. And, yeah, I called that one. I think that one was pretty evident. And you take a team to win the outright championship over Villanova, you almost have to give it to him. And, again, it's a league of a lot of great coaches. I mean, you got the legendary Patrick Ewing and Chris Mullins, but also some very good coaches, Ed Cooley at Providence and Kevin Willard at Seton Hall. They're just it's quite an accomplishment.
And congratulations out to him, and it's a fantastic thing for Cincinnati. And I don't know if you saw the article in the Inquirer the other day. They've stolen our moniker of the three-headed monster. We're talking about it, and that's going to be a great thing moving forward, that they have that depth down low. But, yeah, it is time for the Big East tournament, and yesterday everything got started. Like I said, the Johnnies will be playing them at noon, and Marquette won their game, so they'll move on to play Villanova. And this is always interesting because we're not really playing for a spot in the NCAAs, and losing today might knock us off that number one seed, but I doubt it. But the Johnnies, they're playing for tournament life, and they finished at 16-6. And when you talk about the Big East, there's only one team, and that was DePaul, who we just played, who finished under 500, and that says a lot for the league, that people are that strong all the way around. But of course, they didn't finish until about 9:30 last night. They got to get up this morning and do it. That works against the Red Storm. But this is a team that's given us fits in the two games that we played against them. We did pull away to win both games by 5, I think 5 or 6 in there.
5 and 6.
But the St. John's has given us fits, and that leads us right into what can we expect today.
Well, not only have they given us fits, but you got to remember that stretch back a few weeks ago when they beat Duke in the Gardens, and then they turned around and went to Villanova and beat Villanova. Actually, was maybe the deciding game between the Musketeers and the Villanova Wildcats for the league. So you cannot go into this game thinking that there's no chance of losing, because there obviously is. This is a talented team that can play very well. It's got some individual superstars, and again, they've proven that they can beat some of the best teams in the country. The other factor is they're playing on their home court in front of their home crowd. Now, how many fans will the Johnnies have at noon today? I don't know. Is anybody working in New York? Of course, New York was inundated with a major snowstorm yesterday, so some people may call in and say they can't make it to work, but they'll get to the Gardens to watch the game. But the key factor, and of course this is the whole reason why you are the number one seed, is that the Musketeers should have the advantage in being fresh. And the other factor that leads right into that is, of course, they're a lot deeper than the Johnnies. The Johnnies really only play 5 guys. They have a couple guys that come off the bench who don't really contribute a whole lot, and they've been known to, push 5 guys well into the 30-plus minute range for a game. Now, they did play those 2 guys a little bit more last night. Actually, Shamari Pons wasn't in the game for 40 minutes, as he sometimes is, and that was probably just they did get a little bit of a lead there, or I think maybe that Chris Mullins was trying to think ahead, realizing that they couldn't play 40 minutes last night and then turn around and play the Musketeers today. Key, I believe, is, as I was saying, that the Musketeers try to stay under control, because, again, the Johnnies, a lot of talent. They like to play up and down. They need to keep Shamari Pons under control. They can't let him go off and have 30, 40 points. And I think they need to, just stay the course, because here's what you're going to see. Yeah, the Johnnies got to be tired, but it's not going to show up probably until about the last 10 minutes of the game, when the adrenaline starts to run thin and their legs start to get tired from that quick, about a little over a 12-hour turnaround. So that's going to be the key. The other key, I think they have an advantage, and Chris Mullins, I saw his interview right after the game last night, and they asked him about Xavier. And he said, well, Xavier is probably the most physical team in the league, and I think that's where they got to take advantage early on, is go down low, use the big men, the 3-headed monster, as we've called them, and other people have started to pick up on that. Another one, I think I was the first to call Mikura Dennis a menace, and now I start to see that in the national media. We should copyright this stuff, Jeff, and we make lots of money.
Lots of money, just like we are on this podcast. Yeah,
That's right. You're right.
Yeah.
So that's what I see the key is, and the other thing that will happen is if the Musketeers do pound the ball down low, I think they'll start to pick up fouls down low. And, of course, the other advantage of the 3-headed monster is the 3-headed monster gets 15 fouls. So with that thin lineup that they have, if they can get the Johnnies in foul trouble and make them have to get more minutes out of some of those bench players, I think that'll be an advantage. So I think if the Musketeers attack this in a smart manner, I think they should come away winners. But I think the early going, it's going to be a close game for a while. They just have to stay the course and wear the Johnnies down.
Yeah. And that's the case. It's always difficult when you come to tournament time, and you know that you're probably in to fight all the way to the end. And the only chance that St. John's is going to have to get in the NCAA tournament is to win these next 3 games and get through there. But that's a tough slog, as you said many times, getting 4 games in 4 days, and especially with this quick turnaround. So we're hoping it goes well. In the rest of the Big East, though, probably a bigger game for tournament ramifications will be that 7 o'clock game where Marquette has to play Villanova, because Marquette is on not really on anybody's bubbles, but to be considered, they're probably going to have to win that game. And we will mention, too, it's a great time to be in New York, snowstorm or not, because both the Big East and the ACC tournaments are in there. There's an article in the New York Times today about how tough it is for teams to find places to practice because you got all these teams in New York. But the big thing is for that game in particular, the Eagles are going to have to, if not win, make an extremely strong showing against Villanova for their chances in the NCAA. It seems like most of the rest of them, Xavier, Providence, Creighton, Butler, Seton Hall, most people on their boards have them in the dance, but Marquette's one of those that's going to need a good tournament run.
Yeah, and almost, I don't know if you saw the end of the game last night, but Max Strus had a wide-open three at the very, very end and just clanked it off the rim, or otherwise the Golden Eagles would have been defeated by the DePaul Blue Demons. So they escaped that with a 1-point victory. I think the Golden Eagles have to win today, and I think most experts have said that. If they don't win today, they're not going to make the NCAA tournament. Might be an NIT team, but and they got a little bit more rest than the St. John's Red Storm, not Red Storm, Red. What do they call it? Yeah, they're the Red Storm.
Red Storm.
Mm-hmm. I think, they got a quick turnaround, but they got about 24 hours, not quite 24 hours rest. So, and I think that they could pull it off, just the fact that when Rousey and Howard get hot, they can really light it up. Didn't do that really last night against DePaul. In fact, they pretty much led that all the way and let the Blue Demons slip back in and have a chance to win right at the end. So it's, kind of, you remember last year, this is where the Musketeers were. Remember, they had to go out and beat DePaul in that play-in game, which people thought put them in. And then, of course, when they beat Butler in the quarterfinals, and that's what put them over the hump and, of course, led to that NCAA run. And I was watching an interview with Chris Mack where he said that I think our guys realize when we play some of these teams that, they are where we were last year, so they understand that they're playing with a little bit of desperation. The only other team that might be on the bubble, I think everybody kind of has them in right now, but I think if they would be defeated today, and they will be the underdog, but if they're defeated handily, this might hurt them, and that's the Providence Friars. They're probably, of the 6 teams that are supposedly in, probably the one that might still have a little bit of heart-racing moments on Sunday if they don't win at least one game in the tournament.
And that's going to be a heavy burden to bear playing Creighton, the Creighton Blue Jays, who are probably in, but still, people want to fight for the Big East tournament title and know that you've gotten in. And, of course, tomorrow, that game comes right after the Xavier game in MSG. And then there's a bit of a break, only 2.5 hours between the first 2 games, and then there's a gap from 2:30 to 7 for the next game. So they got the 2 evening games of Villanova versus Marquette, and then Seton Hall versus Butler. And then the semifinals will be tomorrow night at 6:30 and 9, and the championship game will be the following day. It leaves you to move ahead, and we've got that. This time next week, we'll be knowing where these teams are playing. And right now, I think one of the big things about Xavier holding on to its number 1 seed is the fact that they would probably play in the Midwest bracket, and that first 2-round games would be in Pittsburgh, which is really the closest set unless they get sent up to Detroit. But Pittsburgh would be a good spot for them to play whoever they are, and a lot of Xavier fans would be able to make it. You can even drive to Pittsburgh. So we're hoping that is where they land.
Yeah, the other first-round site that might be an option that's fairly close is Nashville. And, if they were a number 1 seed, I believe there's something in the way they do it that they would be as close to home as possible. But, the other key about being in the Midwest regional, if they would make it to the Sweet 16, those games would be played in Omaha in the Century Link Center, a place that the Musketeers are familiar with because they go out there and play Creighton every year, and also would be a doable drive, a little bit longer, but some Musketeer fans could probably make the drive to Omaha versus not sure where the West Regional is played, but it's obviously not a drive away. We're on the West
Staples
Coast.
Center. Yeah.
Staples Center in L.A.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we hope that and I think if Villanova and Xavier both make it to the Big East Finals, and what a game that would be, third time, and maybe the Musketeers could get that monkey off their back, beat the Wildcats. But I believe if both of them make it to the Finals, just the way the rest of the teams around in them that have chances at number one seeds, I think they would both probably be number one seeds. And what an accomplishment for a 10-team league to have two of their teams as top seeds in the NCAA tournament. I mean, that makes a statement right there about how tough the Big East is.
Yeah, and it's of course excuse me. It would be easier to go through that Midwest bracket. The only other option might be the second round is the South Regional, which is headed to Atlanta. But I don't think that's going to happen. Of course, Final Four this year in the Alamo Dome in San Antonio. And I'm sure if Xavier makes it, there'll be lots of Muskie fans down there to cheer them on. So an exciting week. I say Chris Mack, Coach of the Year this year. Earlier, he also became the all-time winningest Xavier coach. They haven't announced the all Big East squad yet, but we expect Trevon Blewett at least to be on there as a first teamer, and maybe a couple others as they work down from that. So I want to wish all the teams in the Big East good luck, except for St. John's at noon today, and hope that we do have 6 or 7 teams in the NCAA tournament. So an exciting week. By the time we get back onto this next week, it will be time for them to play that first game. In fact, they'll already have played a couple of the games with the play-in game at Dayton on Tuesday. So it is that time of year. Lots of exciting basketball going on there. They had an exciting Big Ten tournament that Michigan won, and Gonzaga has won the West Coast. There's a lot of teams one by one that are creeping into the tournament, and we know that. And we hope that not only that the Muskies will be in the tournament, but they will be raising the Big East tournament title this weekend to go with their regular season run. Okay.
Well, Jeff, they did name the Big East team, and Trevon Blewett was a unanimous selection.
Excellent.
And
didn't see that.
So that you missed that one. That one came out 2 days ago. Before yesterday was the Coach of the Year. And here's the stat that I saw, and this is just to show how special. It was the third year in a row he'd been on the first team of the Big East. And in the history of the Big East, the entire Big East from 1979, and we're talking, Patrick Ewing, Chris Mullins, and all the stars, there have only been 13 players in the history of the Big East who have been named Big East all first team 3 years in a row. And I'm sure there's probably a few that have been 4 years in a row. Probably, I would guess, Ewing and maybe Mullen have had that distinction. But think about that. Only 13 players since 1979 in the Big East have had it 3 years in a row. So quite an accomplishment. I got to think we're probably going to see, with him being second leading scorer in the history of the program, first in three-pointers, Sweet 16 appearance every year he's played. I got to think number 5 is going to be up in the rafters pretty soon after his departure and graduation from Xavier.
Yeah, it's just the guy who does it the Xavier way. There's no doubt about it. And he is we're very, very happy that he decided to come back for his senior year, because one of the speculations this time last year was that he might try to jump to professional basketball. But he wants to bring special notes to Muskie basketball. It's great. All right, then.
Interesting thing I thought about when he first came here and how this played true. Of course, I have lots of contacts in Indianapolis, and that's where he's from. Actually won, I believe, 3 state championships at Park Tudor High School in Indianapolis. I actually saw one of those when I was over there. This was before I knew he was going to come to Xavier, so I wasn't paying great attention to him. In fact, Yogi Farrell who played at IU was on that same team. Must have been Trayvon's sophomore year because Farrell was a senior that year. But asking people when he did commit, hey, what about this Trayvon Blunt? Is he good? And it kind of come true. So people said, yeah, he's a really good basketball player, a great basketball player. And here's the key, he said he's probably going to be there 4 years because he's not a superior athlete. So making it to the NBA is probably, he's not going to jump early, probably just the fact that he's not a great athlete. But, of course, he's worked very, very hard. And remember, coming out of high school as a freshman, he was kind of chubby. But obviously he's re-chiseled his body with lots of hard work there and has made himself. And I think he'll be on an NBA roster somewhere next year. If not, he'll be playing professional basketball somewhere for, I would say, the foreseeable future.
And we also just found it now. It's buried on the Big East website, but got to send out kudos to Najee Marshall, who made the all-freshman team and was a unanimous selection there.
And probably the next superstar at Xavier, too. He's just a very talented at 6'7". Although he had a not-so-great game up at DePaul. I think he only scored 2 points, but he did have 11 rebounds, so did have a part in that big win up there.
All right, then. Stay tuned for this time next week where we'll be doing our Razorcast with tournament ramifications. Of course, you can always join us on Tuesday for our Troncast, which will be talking about all things NCAA basketball. We'll know the full 68 then, and we can talk about it, and Jim and I will be making our Final Four predictions once we see what we've got there. Okay, let's head on down to the trivia and tidbits.
All right. I think I got an easy one for you today, but we'll see. Let's talk about Chris Mack, Big East Coach of the Year. And, of course, it's often reported that Chris Mack, of course, was a Xavier graduate, is a hometown boy, and all that is talked about a lot in the national media. But I think you probably know this, Jeff, but maybe some of our listeners don't. Chris Mack did not play all of his years at Xavier. He started out at another university, that being?
The Purple Aces.
The Purple Aces of?
Evansville.
Evansville, very, very good. He played 2 years there for Coach. I'm getting into my layered questions now. You know who was the head coach at Evansville when Chris Mack was playing there?
No. Why don't you tell me?
Who's your legend? Kinda.
Wasn't Bobby Knight.
Bobby Knight protege.
Okay.
Jim Cruz.
Jim Cruz, yes.
Who, of course, then followed Rick Majerus, was with Rick Majerus at St. Louis when they had their great seasons there a few years ago. And then actually after Majerus passed away, Cruz actually was the head coach for a few years, but I think he's back into retirement now. I don't believe he's coaching out at St. Louis anymore. So, well, with a little Chris Mack trivia there, I figured you'd get that one, but I was just trying to pull a fast one on you.
You always do. And, of course, we know that Chris Mack actually got his start coaching at high school level here in Cincinnati at Macaulay.
Girls.
Yeah, both all-girls schools, Macaulay and Mount Notre Dame. So he, before he went on to the Xavier assistant, of course, Mount Notre Dame has had a lot of success under Dr. Scott Rogers, who I believe is the one that took right over for him. But I'd have to look that up. But congratulations to Coach Mack and all of the Muskies for a fantastic season. It is something that we look forward to every year. That's great. All right, time for a couple little tidbits here. Of course, it's that time of year, so we have to say a farewell to a couple coaches. Lamont Smith has decided to resign at San Diego amidst the domestic violence accusations spurred against him, so he will not be back. And Pittsburgh decided to part ways with Kevin Stallings after an over year in the ACC. And that's just sad. There have been many articles about what's happened to Pitt basketball. They just have fallen right off the grid since they decided to part ways with Jamie Dixon, who took them to like 15 straight NCAA championships. But a couple of quick ones. Good luck to the mushers and the runners for the Iditarod. The marathon dog sled race across Alaska is in full swing right now, first held in 1967. It has two routes through the famous Iditarod Trail, for which it takes its name. This year, as in all even other years, it takes the northern route, which is 975 miles, to test the endurance of humans and their canine friends in the dog sled race that goes across. Started off as just a bunch of people finding something to do in the cold months up there in Alaska, and now it's a multi-million-dollar endeavor. So good luck to all of them as they go through. And a sad note, it was this week in 1982 that the great comedian John Belushi passed away. Made his name as one of the original not-for-primetime players on a program called Saturday Night, which became now is known as Saturday Night Live. And we put the connection there because one of his co-stars was the father of current Xavier assistant coach Luke Murray and now celebrity Muskie fan Bill Murray. Quite a talent, left us way too young. Watch some of those old movies, you young people, if you don't know. If you haven't seen John Belushi in Animal House or the Blues Brothers, you'll know what we missed out on. So again, be with us on Tuesday for our Trogcast and come back on Thursday for our Razorcast. And until then, you going to say it?
Food fight! Oh, no, that's
No.
Belushi, isn't it? Noon today. Go Muskies!